We are Geekcentric, and you can be too. Love ya. Get home safe, guys. Peace.
Welcome back to the Geekcentric Podcast. My name is Justin, and today we have a special interview with a Hollywood producer and a friend of the podcast. But before we get to that, if you're joining us for the first time, this is a weekly podcast covering the world of film, television, gaming, toys, collectibles, and all things geek-centric. Joining me for today's episode is my friend Andy Horwitz, Executive Vice President at Atlas Entertainment, the film production company behind massive hits like Christopher Nolan's Batman films, Wonder Woman 1 and 2, and Justice League. Some of Andy's projects include the Oscar-nominated film American Hustle, starring Christian Bale, Bradley Cooper, Amy Adams, and Jennifer Lawrence. Also, 2016 Suicide Squad, starring Will Smith, Margot Robbie, and Jared Leto. And the Netflix film Triple Frontier, starring Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Charlie Hunnam, and Pedro Pascal. Andy started his career as an assistant to Charles Roven and worked his way up to becoming a powerhouse producer, leading multiple projects in the industry. We are so excited to have him on the podcast to learn more about what he does, his passions, and what it's been like reliving Suicide Squad again with the release of James Gunn's new film. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Andy, thank you so much for joining us on the Geekcentric Podcast. I'm super excited to get you on here, and someone of your background and your expertise in what you do, which of course we'll elaborate on much more in a couple questions. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and a big fan of what you guys do. You know, part of the reason why we do what we do is because we enjoy watching what you guys do and how you interpret it. That's what makes it all worth it for us.
Exactly. So, you know, before we kind of learn a little bit more about what you do and your role and so on, I thought we could start our conversation just like we start our regular episodes. On most of our episodes, we start with something called Whatcha. And Whatcha is where we can share with one another anything we've been watching, reading, listening, basically anything we are enjoying right now. So Andy, what you been up to, bro?
Well, I mean, I've been a busy, but it's been a busy year. You know, it's been we've been up to a lot of stuff. I mean, the stuff I've been enjoying on TV right now, I will say, is I'm deep into the White Lotus and just really enjoying it. And I've always kind of had a thing for movies and shows that take place in Hawaii, and I love Hawaii. It's sort of like my second home away from home, and it is. I will say it's the first thing that I've seen about Hawaii, sort of, but takes place in Hawaii that kind of doesn't make me want to go to Hawaii. Like it's like I feel like every film I see that shoots there or takes place there, it sort of makes you want to go. And this is the first one, and I weirdly kind of love it because of that. Like it just I just don't know how to feel when I watch it, which I like. You know, I like the fact that it's just like this anxiety-inducing show with the craziest characters ever in a resort in Hawaii.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think I've heard of it, but I don't think I've seen much on it. Is it a show? Is it streaming anywhere? Or?
Yeah, it's HBO. HBO.
Oh, okay,
it's on
cool.
HBO and HBO Max. You can watch it. It's called White Lotus. It's Mike White that wrote and directed all of it, actually. It's very much in his voice. And the basic concept is it takes place in the Four Seasons on Maui. Right. And it just shows these crazy people that have the ability and the money to afford a $9,000 a night hotel room, who they really are, what their lives are really like. It's a weird character study, and it's one of those shows too that the tone of the show is entirely defined by the music, and the music and the score is really interesting and weird, and it's definitely worth checking out. It takes a few episodes to get into it, but once you're in, you are in. But yeah, it's called White Lotus. It's on HBO.
I'll definitely have to check it out. For myself, I actually just watched Val Kilmer's documentary called Val.
So did I. Yeah.
It was really obviously we won't give away spoilers here on this conversation, but honestly, it was heartfelt. It was heavy.
It gives. I've always respected him as an actor. I think he's been such a talented actor forever, but it gives you a lot of insight into, you know, how the mind of those sort of genius character actors, or those people that really go meta, you know, that really lean in and go method, and you know what their lives are like outside. And you know, I don't know. I learned so much about him, and it just gave me a whole new level of respect for what he's done and what he's accomplished. And it was a nice little trip down memory lane just to see some of the old stuff that he had done and the behind the scenes stuff. And
the behind the scenes stuff I appreciated. I love the behind the scenes, and that part was a lot of fun. I also felt like, you know, to your point, Andy, he kind of like the documentary really highlights how he is an artist. Like his approach was very artistic, and I totally. I was fortunate enough to go to a visual arts school, and you know, I just could see some of the people that I went to school with, like the painters, the sculptors, in this person who was such a method actor, and just found his way through not just acting but all sources of visual medium to really kind of express himself so beautifully. So I don't know, like the doc was great. I love the collaboration with his son, and if anyone's listening and you haven't checked it out, it's on Amazon Prime. Do check it out. It's really
cool. It's really cool. And some of the footage that he has, you know, like some of the behind the scenes stuff from Island of Dr. Moreau with Marlon Brando. And, you know, like you're watching some of that stuff and you're like, holy shit. Like, it's just, I don't know. And just think about, like, you know, carrying a camera around back then, you know, that's a camera that you have to put on your shoulder that probably records on VHS tapes. Just a very different thing comparatively to now, when everyone's got a camera in their pocket. And so it's to think that he was sort of an early adopter to, you know, filming everything on his own when he had to have these old school cameras was super cool. It reminded a lot about it. Was, you know, that's how kind of I was in high school, and I was that guy too.
Right. No, that's exactly it. Like even with myself, with like a, you know, I think we used mini
DVs,
mini DVs, right? Right. But like, you know, even in 1983, when you know, that one stood out for me in that documentary when he was filming Sean Penn and Kevin Bacon, and you see how young they are.
Totally. And also people were themselves, because there was no, they're going to upload it to the internet, right? There was no internet. So it was like, there wasn't much to do with that footage except show it to certain people at your house. And so I think when people were being videotaped and recorded back then, it wasn't the way that we look at it now, where you're worried about it popping up on the internet and everyone and millions of people seeing it. Back then, it was just, you knew it was going to stay with him. There was really nothing to do with it.
It was a genuine vulnerability behind seeing these people. One last thing, I got to mention it just because it helped me for today, but I listened to the podcast from Ryan Perez. Podcast is called An Actor's Despair. It actually was your episode. I really enjoyed this episode. I wanted to get a little more context because of our questions that we're asking you today are a little bit outside of that. So I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any repetition and so on. But I got to say, to hear your story, man, like to hear the struggles and to understand what goes into being a producer in Hollywood, like, dude, like all power to you for the success that you've had. It sounds like it's a very relatively short period of time. I guess 2007 is kind of your kickoff start. If you were really thinking about it.
I mean, you think that's like, I mean, I'm coming up at almost 15 years here at Atlas Entertainment. So it's been, it is why, you know, when I say the words 15 years, it's like shocking that when it comes out of my mouth, but it feels like I just started yesterday. You know, it all went by so fast, and it's been pretty great. It's been a great journey so far. And as I said at the end of it, you know, the good news is I'm just getting started, which is good.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, right? So okay, well, with that, I think it's perfect for us to get into our first question that I have for you, and it's kind of inspired by the meme generations of today, right? Because, you know, there's always like that, what do your friends think you do? And then what I actually do. So what do friends commonly think you do?
You know, my friends, and I still am lucky enough to have, you know, a big group of friends that I've known since I was in kindergarten and have saw me grow up and always saw me growing up with the kid with the camera in his hand and the one making the home videos and editing things together. And so it's funny because they look at the movies that I make and the movies that my company makes, and they think that all I do is fly around on private jets and have fancy dinners with celebrities and, you know, wipe my ass with dollar bills and, you know, do that. They think that's what my life is. And it's completely, I would say, the opposite. I mean, yes, at times there are an occasional private jet flight on a movie or having dinner with actors and actresses. But for the most part, producing is a 24/7 gig. So we don't
Right.
clock in and clock out. We're 24/7, 365 days a week. And the way I always explain it is that Hollywood doesn't slow down because we're taking a day off or I want to go on vacation. Hollywood continues to keep going. And if you clock out for any period of time, Hollywood will pass you by, And so you sort of have to always have your hand on the pulse. But really it's, what we do is sort of, the best analogy, I guess, is we continue to push boulders up hills all day long while there are plenty of people at the top of the hill that are kicking them back down at us, and we're just continuing to push it back up. And that's probably the best analogy of what we do. Every film, as I tell people, like every movie is a miracle. It really is. Like any movie that actually gets made, anytime you actually have a set where there's cameras there and there's actors there and you're about to call action for the very first time, all the things that had to go right to get to that point is usually years of being told no and struggle and blood, sweat, and tears and failures and, all to get to that point of just getting to be able to shoot a movie. And then once you do that, every day on the set is its own challenge and its own set of problems that are there to solve. And then once you get to the point where you finally shoot the whole movie and you've got it all in the can, then you run into the post-production process where, again, every day is a new challenge and there's new problems to solve.
Okay, so that's what your friends think you do. So how would you describe to them what you actually do?
So the best way I would describe, to my friends that are outside the business of what I do is it's really I'm a problem solver and a deal maker. It's really what it is. And it's continuously trying to create situations where I can put packages together that people want to invest money in to go make because they believe it's going to make a good movie, not because they just want to make a good movie, but more importantly, they want to make money on the movie. So it has to be financially successful as well. So I think producers are really responsible for the lifespan of the film. They're there when the movie is born and they're there when the movie is sort of buried and done, so we're sort of we're the constant denominator, I think, in almost every film that's made.
Well, yeah, and that's a really great way to put that, and I think, like, again, referencing Ryan Perez's podcast and just learning the insights of certain movies like Triple Frontier or American Hustle was another one. Like, I think it's so crazy to think that we as the people that enjoy the content just sit there, but we don't know the trials and tribulations that go into that, which is now why I find myself so passionate about the behind the scenes and watching shows like on Netflix. They have the movies that made us. And
I love that show. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that behind the scenes aspect of learning about, like, the latest season talks about with Jurassic Park and learning about all the insights with the animation and stuff like that. Just so cool to see. And again, the trials and tribulations that people went through to get that project and the success that it garnished, obviously, as we went through. So you said in the podcast as well, you just mentioned it in this discussion here, that you went to film school. And I was curious, like, in the podcast, you talked about how, like, there was no program for producing, which I thought was obviously very, very interesting. But if you didn't get into producing, is there any other avenue of production that you would have gotten into? Because you said you did from cinematography to screenwriting to I think editing as well. So would there be any other place that you could see yourself or you'd like to dabble in, maybe in the alternate universe of Andy working in movies?
I mean, there is a weird world where I would love to direct a movie one day. I think
there we go. I'd love that.
It's never going to be something that I actively pursue it. To me, if it ever happens, it'll just be because I just sort of fell into it and it kind of just happened. So to me, it's something that would be fun, but I would do it because it was fun and not because it's something that I've been sort of chasing down that dream all day, every year.
It has to be the right opportunity, the right story, I guess, too, right? Like, that would have to be a huge part with that. And we've mentioned all the various projects that you've been a part of over the last 15 years of doing this. And in that 15 years, is there a project that you really enjoyed working on the most, and why?
I would say and I tell people this, the most fun I've ever had making a movie was definitely Suicide Squad in 2016. It was the most unique set I think I've ever been on, just in terms of the camaraderie, there's so many reasons why, but for me, it was the first big movie that I had a real responsibility on. It was like it was my first shot to kind of be a producer that's there every day, that people are looking to for answers, to sort of guide the ship, to being really under the hood with all the actors and making sure that they were happy, and that we were keeping everyone on track and on schedule and on budget. And it just was one of those that it was a really hard movie and a really difficult movie, but just the most fun I've ever had making a movie. It really was. And then my tagline to that is that the least fun I've ever had posting a movie in post-production.
Right.
But, and I don't think there's a correlation between those two things, between having a lot of fun making the movie and then struggling with it in post-production. But it was a blast to make, and my fondest memories. And, I met my wife on that movie as well.
I know, that's crazy, right?
I know, yeah.
But yeah, like when you speak about Suicide Squad, man, it was filmed in our backyard in Toronto. It was all over the news, just how much fun everyone was having. I remember seeing Jai Courtney and Jay Hernandez with my wife at the Blue Jays game, and they were just like trying not to like make eye, but they looked at me and I was like, I know who you guys are, and I know why. I know why Jay Hernandez is completely bald right now. So
with no eyebrows, we shaved his eyebrows off as well. Yeah. So we had such a good time in that city making that movie, and we were all there for 9 months, so we spent so much time there, and the city was so good to us, and it was just as you saw, we took over downtown for a substantial period of time, and it was a fun process making that movie, but a tough one. But they're all tough.
I know, and it looked fun though, and I think that sort of family that came together on that production was felt very much so throughout its sort of run of the marketing and leading up to it. So that's crazy. That's cool. Okay, let's get to the next question here. Who is someone you've worked with in the past that you would want to work with again?
Definitely Margot Robbie. She is a force to be reckoned with, and no doubt the most talented person I think I've worked with, just in terms of just being the coolest person ever. Like just someone that is a team player, always has the best interest for the movies in mind, does the work through and through, like really does the work, comes prepared. In Suicide Squad, in both of them, she did most of her stunts herself. Anything that she could do, anything that we would let her do, she would do. She's got her stunt double is this woman named Ingrid, who's so talented too, and is so amazing at what she does. And I think Ingrid is always there and doesn't get to work as much as she wants to, because Margot really takes it upon herself to do it. So my goal is, there's one or two things that we're talking to her about, and I would love to get one of those things made in the future, because she's just a pleasure to work with.
Yeah, I've heard that about her. I've heard that she's just so down to earth, and she has such an approach to not just her acting, but just like to the movie itself. Like, do you find, and this is not specifically to Margot Robbie, but working with actors specifically that also want to, or that step into that producing role, how do they necessarily take on two roles? Is it more of like a creative input, or does it extend?
It's a little bit of both. Oftentimes when actors have producing credits, it usually means they were involved in the project well before there was financing, well before it landed at a studio, and they were integrally involved in the getting the movie made process, not just because they were attached and it lends value to them, but because they actually picked up the phone and made calls. And, when you're an actor producer, there's a real responsibility that you have as a producer. And so, oftentimes when, actors could make special requests and asks and scheduling issues, and sometimes those requests come with a financial cost. And so when they're an actor producer, you can go to them as their producing partner and go, hey, if we have to move the schedule around to make this work, we lose X amount of money. And if we lose X amount of money, that money gets pulled off screen. And is that really something that we have to do? And oftentimes with actor producers, they'll take a step back and go, okay, wearing my producer hat, you're right. This is irresponsible for me to ask this, or we shouldn't be doing this. And so, It really does help oftentimes to have an actor or an actress that is a producer, because they have, as a producer, the most important thing is the movie. It's more important than an individual. It's more important than the most important thing is a producer is you're always protecting the movie, and the movie's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So when you have a big piece of talent that has the producer hat on, it's really helpful to know that your star of your film is not just thinking about what's best for them, but is what's thinking about what's best for the movie itself and for the whole lifespan of the film. And I will say Margot is one of the few actor producers out there that truly does the work as a producer. Mm-hmm. She really rolls up her sleeves. She picks up the phone, she gets involved, she really cares.
She seems like that kind of person, right? Like,
yeah, she does. And she has a tremendous amount of respect for the title producer. It's not just something she gets to make some extra money or to have some more control. It's really something that she does because she wants to help the facilitation of the movie being made and the quality of the film, and be involved in the process. And I don't blame, a lot of these actor producers that want to be more involved in the process, because as we all know, movies can go off the rails. And if you're a big star in a big movie that doesn't work, it's going to have an effect on your career. And Absolutely. So I don't blame a lot of these people for wanting to be more involved and just to have a say in the process sometimes. And you'd be surprised how helpful it is when you're dealing with the studio that, may have a certain opinion, and a big piece of talent that also happens to have a producer title weighs in. Sometimes it does carry more weight than just us producers, and it's helpful that because they want to keep everyone happy.
Right. Exactly. That makes a ton of sense. Speaking of like producing movies, you talked a little bit in the podcast as well about, producing Triple Frontier that obviously took quite a while. What was the strategy around that movie to kind of, because I guess it was a straight to streaming platform, was it? Or what did it release?
Well, Netflix made it. No, Netflix actually made it. We did get a very small theatrical Netflix release, which was like,
perfect.
20 theaters on 20 screens for 2 weeks. It was just sort of a vanity release. But yeah, I mean, Netflix, they didn't just buy that movie. We physically made that movie with Netflix. Crazy. And as one of their big originals. Yeah.
And so with that, like, obviously you're coming from something like Suicide Squad, or doing a movie like Suicide Squad, that's a little bit more, I guess, CGI'd to a certain degree. Do you like doing the more, production heavy sort of green screen CGI'd stuff, or do you like the sort of rugged, real sort of aesthetic of filmmaking, like getting into it as you will?
I mean, right? As a producer, I always try to tell people this when they want to come visit me on set, is like, set is fucking boring. It really is. Like, it's fun for about 10 or 15 minutes to see famous people and to see it. But like, for the most part, being on set is a real slow burn, and it gets real boring after about, when guests come to set, I would say usually about 45 minutes in, they're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. They just want to see what it's about, right?
Yeah, and it gets way more boring if you're sitting on a green screen stage for months and months at a time, playing make-believe with green, people wearing green suits. And so for me personally, I always preferred like the sort of practical old school movie making way. And, oftentimes it's just not affordable to do it that way. And the way in which we make films usually is guided by the most cost-effective way to do it, as opposed to the best way to do it. So, but with Triple Frontier, we made that movie old school way. We shot almost that entire movie on location with real cars and real stunts and in the elements. And we only spent 3 days on a stage, and that was the interior of the helicopter while it was crashing. But outside of that, we were there. We were in all those places, and you could feel it. I mean, if you watch Triple Frontier and you're watching the scenes where they're freezing their asses off, sitting around a fire trying to keep warm, or Ben Affleck, is sort of, shivering. I mean, that's all real. Like, we're freezing our asses off up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And to me, it's just like, it feels more authentic when the audience is watching it. It feels like you're there. And I think if you compare that to, the George Clooney movie that came out on Netflix, which I'm blanking the name, just came out this year, I think, where it takes place like up in the Arctic, and he's freezing his ass off the whole movie. I mean, I'm watching that film and I'm going, this is all on a stage, and I get it. Like, but they shot so much of that on a stage that you could just tell it feels very, I don't know. It feels very,
it feels artificial. I totally agree with you. And I knew that most of Triple Frontier was shot on location. I do agree. I think that there is an authenticity to the acting, putting these actors in location, on real sets, that makes them kind of, really connect. I think, like, have you seen The Green Knight?
I haven't yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I just haven't caught it yet.
It's fantastic. And Joel Egerton talks about, what it was like being on that set and how he was able to just sort of connect with the environment and really embrace his character. And I think that that's what that really does in those situations, is it really opens that door for the actor to really connect with that character. And again, your cast for Triple Frontier, you got Oscar Isaac, you got Ben Affleck,
Charlie Hunnam, Pedro Pascal.
Right. And they're Oscar Isaac and Pedro Pascal are like best friends, like,
Garrett Hedlund. And they were, they are besties. And it's funny, like, just going back really quickly to the being in the elements. And I remember sitting there with Pedro while we were up in the Sierra Nevadas, up in by Mammoth Mountain, and we were shooting, and we were truly freezing. I mean, like literally freezing. And and I remember him, talking about how freezing we all were and how cold we all were. And I remember looking over at him because we had just cast him in Wonder Woman too. And so we were talking about it, and I just said, Pedro, remember this moment, because when you're on a green screen stage for 3 months at a time on Wonder Woman 2, being bored to death, you're going to really appreciate being here in the elements, freezing your ass off. And he laughed. He thought that was hilarious. And so, we spoke after Wonder Woman, and he was like, I thought about that moment. But yeah, I mean, there's a real difference from physically being there and being on a stage with green screen around you. But yeah, I loved our cast on Triple. Triple was it. We had again, that was another one we had such a great time working on, and the cast were real pros and team players, and we put them through some serious shit in that movie, and they came out in such a great way.
And dude, they felt so connected, right? Like it was really great how there was that sort of brotherhood that really leaps through the screen. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. I really enjoyed that you really connected with the characters and the elements and so on. Okay, let's get into some other questions here. These are more questions that are surrounding some news things and some other stuff that I'd like to talk, because we're getting towards the end here. And there's something specific I'd like to ask you, just with your expertise and sort of the background that you have. Right now there's a lot of news surrounding lawsuits between actors and studios as they push their movies to be released as in both theaters and direct to consumer content on streaming platforms. How is this changing the industry, and what needs to happen for this to be more future proof and protect, all people, all parties involved?
I don't think there's a good answer for that right now, because I think right now we're in the middle of a transition phase. And so there are a lot of studios that are just trying certain things to see if it works, because we don't know what the norm is going to be. We're not in the norm anymore. And so I do think 2 years from now, then we will figure it out. And I think the studios will have figured out what works best for them. The lawsuits, I get it. Like, these are people that, have worked their ass off, have potentially taken less fees for bigger pieces of the back end. And up until just a few years ago, actors made far more, and producers and directors and writers, we all made far more money on the back end by the success of the film than we did on the fees we get paid to make them. Right. And so for so many people, that's how people got rich, from back end money and from making and from gross and theatrical gross and all of that stuff that comes into play. And now I think everyone feels that it's just it's changing, and it's going away. It just is going away. And I think, to me, the future of where the business is going is going to be a more volume-based business as opposed to a one-off based business, meaning that you just need to make more movies to make the same money that you were making, with one big hit. And it's hard to determine what's a hit these days, it just is because you don't know, how some of these films would have done in the box office had they not been offered to people for free at home. You just don't know. And we will never know what the real effect of that is going to be. But I could probably say that it's going to be a bit before we see $1 billion movie again. I don't know how a movie makes $1 billion again unless theatrical goes back. And even if you look at I don't know. It's a hard question to answer because we're sort of right
in the midst of it,
position.
right?
Yeah, and as I said, studios are trying. Everything is sort of experimental at the moment. Let's try this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try a different approach. And there's going to be a lot of trial and error that's going to be happening in Hollywood for the next year and a half, probably, while we get through the pandemic. And during that trial and error period, there are going to be a lot of feelings hurt and a lot of people that are feeling like their movie didn't get its day in court, or they should have made a lot more than they did initially. And it's really a product of trying to come to terms with the fact that it's just harder and harder to make real money in this business as a creator and as a producer and as an actor, and anywhere that you're not part of the conglomerates that are running these streamers.
Yeah, I guess it's like the golden days, right? I guess you could say the industry has already gone through a bit of a change with the whole, streaming content and Netflix, and now Disney Plus is in on this, and what are they doing with their properties and how they place things. So obviously then you factor in COVID into this whole situation, it's only going to make more things worse. But I think it's safe to say you're a theater guy though, right? Like you like to see movies in theaters.
I am, and I would, I'm always going to be that way. That's just because it's how we grew up. It's where I fell in love with movies, sitting in a movie theater, not sitting at home. And I think, the landscape is constantly evolving. And I do think that, in my opinion, there are studios and corporations that have used the pandemic to make a change that they've wanted to do, but haven't had an excuse to do it. And I think now with the pandemic, it was like, oh, now we can operate under it's the pandemic, which is why we're making these decisions. When in actuality, these decisions are best for, they're best served to the streaming services and the corporations that own them, as opposed to the people that are making these films. And so, it's just a very strange time right now. And I think anyone that pretends to tell you that they know exactly why things are happening and how they work, I would question that in a significant way, just because those of us that have been in the business for a very long time, we're looking around and going, well, we're trying to catch up. What's the best way to do it? And we're just trying all sorts of different things. And I think, it's evolving. It's just going to continue to evolve. And I don't think we're going to be in the quote unquote new normal for at least, a year or two here.
Yeah, I think it's sort of exciting too at the same time to see the industry sort of go through a process of maybe reevaluating what really deserves an in-theater experience and what can be experienced at home, especially given obviously the pandemic, but just giving more situations and options for people, right? Like the reality is the reality for us here in Canada, it's like, we go for a movie, it's like $15 to see that movie, right? If you're a family of four, that gets up there, and then you got to get all the concessions and stuff like that. And that's where these places really make their money. So it's a bit different, I know, per country, but I know that there's options. If there's options, then consumers are going to have that option, right?
Absolutely. And it's not all doom and gloom. It's just not.
For sure.
There's absolute benefits to the new model and what's happening. There are so many different ways to look at it where there's a silver lining that makes sense, for the fans. And again, that's who we make movies for. That's why we grind away every day, is for the fans. That's the best. That's the reason we do it. And so, there are so many movies that would never get made in the traditional theatrical studio world that we lived in prior to COVID and prior to streaming. And so now with streaming and with this new model, it is giving a lot of movies that would have just never seen the light of day an opportunity to get made, because there's a different financial structure that comes with them, in which the studios won't lose money on them. They need to fill slots, and they need to keep making movies. In order to do that, they need to be looking into different nooks and crannies that they may not have looked at before. And it's giving us the ability to, like I said, get movies made that may not have gotten made before.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. Cause all three of us here at Geekcentric are huge fans of the movie theater experience. So that's great. So let's get to my next question here, which is about Suicide Squad. So in 2015, I had the opportunity to go to Comic-Con, and I think you were there. as well.
It was,
yeah. You were there promoting Suicide Squad, and honestly, I wasn't in Hall H to actually see the trailer. However, it did leak, and there was people that were sharing it, and I watched that thing, I think, a bajillion times. Like, I was so blown away, and that was probably the last time I ever saw that dark, gritty tone, as the movie was obviously much, much different. And obviously, there's been a lot of discussion with the release of the Suicide Squad, and the director David Ayer coming out and saying that it wasn't his original vision. So my question really isn't around what happened with that movie, but more or less what can happen. What sort of things happen that would suddenly change the direction of a movie so far from either its original vision or the director's original vision? Yeah,
I mean, I'm happy to get into it a little bit. That moment where we got to show that trailer was like, it was an incredible moment, because what a lot of people don't know is that first trailer that came out, with Margot hanging from the cell, and we had only shot half the movie. We hadn't even shot the whole second half of the movie yet. So as we were shooting the first half of the movie, we were delivering and turning around shots to Warner Brothers so they can start working on a trailer, because don't forget, we started shooting that movie in early April and of 2015, and then that trailer came out in mid-July of 2015. So think about that turnaround, right? We had to we only had a few months to shoot, color, edit, deal with the visual effects, and we're doing that while we're making the movie. And that's how these things work. We knew we had Comic-Con we wanted to hit, and so we started to pick and choose scenes that we felt like we're going to make a great trailer for that moment. And as I said, that trailer consists of footage that we had only shot for the first 2 months of what was a massive shoot. So if you think about the shoot itself, was probably I can't remember the exact number, but between 100 and 105 days. We had only shot about 30 to 40 days at that point that we cut that trailer with. So half the movie hadn't even been shot yet. But one of the great things about that trailer and that moment was, when we had premiered that trailer, like myself and all the cast, we got on a plane in Toronto at 5 a.m. that day.
Yeah, I know.
Flew from Toronto to San Diego, got off the plane, went straight to the convention center, showed the trailer, got to experience that. I mean, when you get that moment of getting to show, 5 to 10,000 people in Hall H, that kind of thing, and have them go bananas, and then run from Hall H back to the plane and get back on the plane and fly to Toronto. I mean, it was such a whirlwind day. We literally had, it was just wild. But what was amazing was, up until that point, we had worked so fucking hard to get, to get the movie off the ground and to make it, and to be able to come back to Toronto with, this is feeling really good, and to show our crew the trailer and go, look at all this work you've been doing, and look at how great this piece is that we cut based on all the stuff that we had shot. And so, like I said, that trailer only consisted of stuff from like the first quarter of the shoot. We still hadn't even shot like 75% of the movie. And that trailer definitely, tonally was very much in line with what David's script was, and what the movie was initially supposed to be. Was going to be.
Yeah, that trailer like literally blew me away, and I just thought it was so different from what the movie was.
That was the tone of the original movie, but let's not forget, we were at that point a very small part of a big giant vision, right? So we had sort of come into that, or at least me myself, as the first DC EU movie that I worked on within the Zack Snyder, universe that he had initially started and created. And so when we were coming in, we were kind of like the ugly stepchild. Like, we're making a movie with bad guys, and the machine was already in full crank mode. They had done Man of Steel. They had done BVS. They were starting Wonder Woman. They were already thinking about Justice League. And then we were sort of this like Suicide Squad coming in with these bad guys that isn't really connected to the other stuff that everyone's doing. And so, we were sort of always like, hey guys, like, remember us, like we're making this movie too. And I remember, the days when we had like, when Affleck came to set and we had Batman on set, and the Batmobile was out there, and like, trying to get the approvals from the other DC partners to get that stuff out. It was just all like,
there's a lot of people to please.
There was a lot going on, and there was just so much happening. And we also, we were also making a pretty dark movie at a time when, and let's be real. The movie that we made initially was greenlit. David Ayer's script was greenlit by Warner Brothers, and that was absolutely the movie that we made. But there's a lot when you're thinking about these kinds of films. You have to think about the big picture, and what was happening at that time is that we had shown our director's cut of the movie to the studio, not too long after BVS came out.
Right.
And so, BVS obviously did extraordinarily well from a financial point of view, but was getting beat up, critically because the movie was too dark. Yeah.
Right.
And so there was, I think, a pretty visceral reaction from the studio when they were getting beat up for having a movie that just came out too dark. And then they just watched a director's cut of a movie that was pretty fucking dark, and so their initial gut reaction was like, well, we got to lighten it up. This can't be, because everyone knew that we were going to be the next movie to come out after BVS in the DCU. And so from that point forward, it was, that's when sort of everything had kind of shifted and changed. And, I guess the best way I can describe it is we were Frankensteining a movie together, based on what we'd shot. And that's kind of what it became.
Yeah, well, David Ayer is probably one of my favorite filmmakers, just because of how real his films are, and he has such a deep personal background that I think outside of film that he just applies to his filmmaking that makes his films feel so visceral and so in the moment. So I thought it was interesting to see that trailer and to understand his aesthetic. So definitely coming out of the movie, you knew that wasn't his vision, and with that. We're now here, 2021, and we have James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, and I think it's, I've said that the original Suicide Squad from 2016 is edited or cut together very much like a James Gunn film with the music beats and just that Guardians vibe. Yeah, how is it to go through this process again?
The movie was never supposed to be a Guardians of James Gunn style film. It was, the Dirty Dozen is really what it was supposed to be with DC characters. Okay. And so, that's where we started the journey. That's not where we ended the journey, but it's where we started the journey on that one. And there's obviously, it was hard to, it was sort of bittersweet because obviously so amazingly happy that people are loving the new movie, but every person that mentioned how much they loved the new movie also shit on the first movie, and within the same sentence usually. And I think people I wish I could remind people that the second movie that everyone loves exists because the first movie was made, and let's not forget that the first movie still made close to $750 million without a China release. And that there's a reason for that, and I think the cast members that people love, some of the cast members that people love in the new movie, they were created in the first movie, and the looks were established in the first movie, and there's so much of the DNA of that first movie that sort of carried us into this next movie that I think people often forget. But and I wish David would have mentioned that in his letter, that, hey guys, you can shit on my movie all you want, but you have this beautiful vision from James Gunn,
which I think he did. He did sort of address it in a really, really professional way that I think he's celebrating that James Gunn was able to do his version of a Suicide Squad. And that's what Warner should really take from this, is that allow your filmmakers to make the movie they want. That paid off. And I think that the things that I appreciated that they did bring over were the character elements, like Amanda Waller with Viola Davis, who was fantastic in both, right? Jai Courtney, who was fantastic in both. Margot, of course, all of that.
Joel Kinnaman, Joel Kinnaman in both too. Crushed it.
Joel Kinnaman was so good in both. Here, he was just so evolved. But that being said, it's also really interesting to see that, as you said, that dichotomy of people celebrating one but shitting on the other. And I would always say,
the new one exists because the first one was financially successful. Exactly. Let's be real. we would have never gotten to make a second one if the first one didn't work financially for the studio. For sure. That's how it works. If a movie bombs financially, that's it. Adios. But what James did was completely unique to himself. You know,
Right.
he didn't lean on that other movie. He really sort of came with his own vision, and it was so much fun. And
There's tons of fun.
you know, even when I first saw it for the first time, I was like, I cannot fucking wait for people to see this movie because it's exactly what the world kind of needed right now. They needed like a reminder of that, you know, movies can be fun and, you know, heartfelt. I mean, even though his movie is fun and crazy, there's still some real emotional stuff going on in there, and some really heartstrings that he pulls out at times. And I don't know. I mean, he's the master. He really is. I mean, James Gunn is just an incredible filmmaker, and he's just got such a vision.
He has such a vision, and he also knows, like, you know, it's usually in the unknown characters that are the most interesting and that can have the most heart. And you know, I said this in our sort of spoiler filled review, where it was like, you know, he has this innate ability in him to know what each character is meant to do and who serves what purpose. And you know, that's so well executed in terms of what he's done here with the Suicide Squad. I still hold, though, that if they do a sequel, I would love to see Will Smith come back. So I will say that I would love to, because I loved him in the movie.
Oh, he was so good as Deadshot. He was so good as Deadshot. And by the way, I was just gonna say, you know, if I had to pick another actor to work with again, I mean, there is a reason Will Smith is Will Smith, and it is because he is just a pleasure through and through. And you know, is even in the first Suicide Squad, when he was just an actor and not a producer, he was so integral to the camaraderie that was happening on that film. His attitude and just the environment and the team that he brings with him. He's got a whole entourage of people, but those people are all amazing, and their attitudes are amazing, and they're great to be around. And he's just like a true ray of positivity, you know, everywhere he goes and what he's doing. And you just realize when he's doing it, you're watching him, you're like, that's why you are so successful, because you're this way. Like, you're just a pleasure to be with.
Absolutely. And you know, I heard a lot about him, just he kind of brought that team together. And like, you saw it in that panel in 2015, when he was just like such a brother to everyone. Like, you know, there was just such respect, and you got the sense of family. Yeah.
I mean, he is. And he said something to me when he first got to Toronto that I'll never forget, when we started that movie. And he said to me, you know, I just want to let you guys know, you've never worked with me before, but I'm here. I'm a team player through and through. And that, you know, every department has its department head. So you've got the DP that's head of the camera department. You've got the production designer that's head of the art department. And, you know, you've obviously got all of these different department heads that sort of run these departments. And he goes, I look at myself as the head of an acting department when I'm on a set. And even though that's not a real thing, there's no title for that. He knows that those other actors are going to be looking to him when things get tough. And I remember very vividly, you know, there were so many moments that were tough on that movie, where we were going into 15, 16-hour days, and everyone just wants to go home, and people are over it. And Will walks on the set, and he's going, let's go, everyone help, you know, like, come on. He's got a smile on his face. And you know that everyone who wants to bitch and moan and complain that they don't want to be there, they look at that and they go, well, if Will Smith is acting that way, how am I going to be a grumpy jerk on set? And so it changes the mood and the environment on the set in the most positive way. And it's just nice having a guy like that on your movie. You know, he brings so much to it.
That's amazing. I really liked in the podcast with Ryan Perez that you talked about being able to witness the birth of two Jokers, one from Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight and Jared Leto. And obviously you're on set with this. So like, my question, how crazy was Jared Leto? Like, was he like, we like all the rumors we heard of like him leaving dead rats and stuff like that, like sending them to the actors and stuff, like that is some method that he really gets into. And obviously, so like, how true are these stories?
90% of those stories are true. You know, there's some embellishment on those stories and what he did, but I will say he kept it interesting, you know, like he just did. And like, he would walk onto set, and some people would be terrified of him, and some people would be so entertained by what was going on. And like, he just kept it fun and interesting. And none of us that had been making movies up until that point, almost nobody had experienced something like that. So, you know, from a producer, you know, when you're dealing with actors, I've never had to produce a movie with the actual Joker in the movie, meaning that he's acting like the Joker and talking like the Joker. And so oftentimes when you need to, knock on an actor's door and go, hey, I know we called you. I know you've been here all day. We need to call you a little early tomorrow. Or, I know you have an engagement you have to get to at the end of the week. So we're trying to change the schedule. We're trying to make you work. Having those kinds of conversations with the Joker is a little bit of a different experience than having it with a normal actor.
Like with Will Smith.
But, yeah, exactly. So, but he kept it fun and he kept it entertaining. Cool. And, it never got off the rails where it became a problem.
Right.
And I remember, and I had never met Jared prior to him getting to Toronto. And the moment he stepped foot in our production office in Toronto, Jared went bye-bye, and it was Joker through and through. And so I had spent, 4, 5, 6 months with him while we were shooting that movie. And it wasn't until we wrapped him where he shot his very last scene and we wrapped him and he walked up to me and he goes, Jared, nice to meet you. And it was like, I had been with him for 5 months and it was always Mr. J or Joker. And so he came up to me afterwards, shook my hand. And he's like, I'm Jared. Nice to meet you. And I was like, oh, there you are. We finally came out of it.
it was, I like to hear some of the stories. And I think one of my favorites was when he dressed up like the Joker as like the tourist, the oversized Hawaiian shirt, the hat and the camera. And he was like walking around Toronto. And I'm like, this guy is in it. And I as a huge geek, I totally appreciated every aspect of that.
Yeah. His crew was into it too. Even like his henchmen were like hanging with him off set and driving around town with him. And I mean, it was a real thing going on.
That's I can only imagine. So speaking of geeky things, as we near the end here of our discussion, one of my questions is actually about you personally. And what you're Geekcentric about. With Geekcentric, it's really about like things that we might be passionate about. I know you're probably a film geek. I think it's safe to say that. But outside of that, what are you passionate about? What do you love?
I surf a lot, and I've been a surfer I've been surfing since I was 12. So it's one thing that I think not a lot of people know about me is every moment I can, I try to get to the beach and get on the board and get in the water. Even if there's no surf, I'll usually just paddle out there to clear my head and hang out in the ocean for a bit. But that's kind of my to me, it's that and rescue dogs and pit bulls are sort of my two things that that take over most of my life outside of making movies. And any moment I'm not here in the office making movies, either out in the water or spending time with the pitties at home and the fostering dogs and rescuing dogs.
Man. Awesome. That's good. I'm thank you for sharing what you're passionate about, what you love to do outside of what you already love to do, and that's making movies. Yeah. As we wrap up here, I'd love to know, are there any projects that you're currently working on or anything that's coming out soon?
I mean, there's a few. We have like 7. As a producer, you have to have about 100 things going at one time, because it's just how it works. So there's so much that we've got going on. There's a few things that I'm really excited about. One of which is a big piece of IP, a video game that we're in the process of turning into a TV series. And so that's something that just happened very recently. And then another thing on the TV front is I was a part of a podcast called Chameleon Hollywood Con Queen that we had made last year during the pandemic, which was a true crime podcast and a story that I was sort of roped into and involved in. And we turned it into a true crime podcast. And throughout the making of the podcast, we actually caught a bad guy and unmasked a bad guy and got an arrest.
What?
And so since then, we've had a lot of interest in turning it into a scripted TV series. So we just found a buyer and a network for that. So we're about to turn our pilot in for that too. And it's the very first time I've ever sold a pitch in which I was a character in the pitch in the story, which was a very strange meta process. But
so wait, is someone going to be playing you in this thing?
I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna have a hard time stomaching keeping the character with my name in there. So
no, for sure, yeah, you could make the change.
I may make the change, just because I don't know if I want to see that. It'll be strange, but yeah. So those two things, I think are the two things that I'm probably most excited about right now. In addition to, who knows where some of the stuff's going to go that we've been working on. But but we have a lot on deck at Atlas, and we've been really busy for the last year and a half. We've got our Uncharted Drake's Fortune movie that comes out first quarter next year, which we're really excited about.
Sick.
And so that's
cool that you guys are behind that.
Yeah, so that's one of our films that comes out early next year that we couldn't be more excited about. And we'll see what the next one is that we get off the ground. I mean, it may happen here soon, and when it does, I'll be able to talk about it.
Well, awesome. Well, you know where to find us, because we would love to have you back on the podcast so we could talk about all things Geekcentric. Thank you so much, man, for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I mean, as I said, I always try to remind people that, most of the reason why we do what we do and leave our families for a year at a time to go make movies and spend, our blood, sweat, and tears on these things is because, we're fans through and through. And I love to what you guys do and to see how passionate you guys are about what we do. And, it doesn't go unnoticed, I will say.
Thanks, man.
We notice and we all pay attention, and it's not for nothing. It definitely means something to us that you guys do that too.
Oh, dude, thanks so much, man. That means so much to us, because, we just think of ourselves as geeks that are just being geeks and loving what we do and talking about it. It means a lot that you think that. So thank you, man. Thanks.
If geeks and nerds didn't exist, we wouldn't be doing what we do, right? So it's part of it. We're all geeks and nerds at heart,
That's
and
exactly
I think,
it.
as I said, it's a big motivating factor for what we do, and it's what makes it all worth it. So,
awesome. Cool, man.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for having me. Yeah,
man.
buddy.
Well, that's it. That's our interview with Andy Horwitz. Thank you so much, man, for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and if you did, make sure you subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts if you haven't already. And if you want to write into us and let us know what you thought of the show, and if you had any thoughts, feel free to reach out to us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Keep in mind, we also have a ton of other episodes covering all sorts of content. We have our spoiler-free review for Disney's Jungle Cruise out now, as well as our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled review for James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Also, we just wrapped up our watch club for The Bad Batch. Nate, Darcy, myself, and our guest, Megan Clara Dross, had a great time discussing the season finale. So if you're a fan of the Star Wars animated world, have a listen to that. And as one watch club ends, we are starting yet another one for Marvel Studios' What If, with our spoiler-filled breakdown available now, with our second episode coming later this week. So we have a ton of content out right now for you to enjoy, and some new stuff coming soon. So make sure you subscribe so you know when our latest episodes drop. A huge thanks again to Andy for taking the time. This was tons of fun to actually do this interview. We hope you enjoyed it, but until next time, peace.